Hi, thank you. Thanks, everyone. You may not know this. I've kind of known and hung out with urban ecology folks for, I don't know, more than 10 years now, 10, 15 years, since they first hosted the Wisconsin Bat Festival back in the day. And then I floated the idea of doing a sabbatical with them. And that happened in 2018. So I got to hang out for an entire spring with the urban ecology folks. And that just kind of ramped up my involvement with, again, some of my favorite people in my favorite city. Yeah, cool. So yeah, March Mammal Madness. So we're in this time of the year where there's this tournament. I think it's basketball, and so there's like 64 teams, and everyone does their brackets. And 10 years ago, I will call them my colleagues because we are mammalogists, came up with an educational tool to mirror the basketball tournament. So they called it March Mammal Madness. And it's grown quite a bit. So this is the 10th year of March Mammal Madness. And the general idea is that you get a bracket. So I'll just go back to the bracket. You download the bracket. And so I do this in carnivore ecology with my students just for fun. And they really get into it. And so they have to upload their filled-in bracket to win great prizes in my class. And I tell them the great prizes are basically kind of t-shirts and textbooks that I'm gonna throw away. So those are the great prizes. So they fill that in and then upload it. And so this is kind of my filled-in bracket. Okay, so my filled-in bracket has, just as an example, the Badger winning it all, because the Badger is a formidable opponent. It's a mustelid, and pound for pound, mustelids are just competitors, right? So that's my thinking on who should be winning this March Mammal Madness. And so you go through and you kind of, the organizers there'll be a kind of these different battles. And so they'll use science, and we'll kind of like go through that to figure out how, which of these two is going to win. So as I was going through, just making my picks, I noticed one of my students, and I kind of scratched my head. I'm like, they had the reindeer going like I think they had the reindeer winning it all. And I thought, that's actually a pretty good pick. Reindeer are Rangifer tarandus. So Rangifer tarandus, these are the things in North America that form these huge migratory herds. And what I like about this is called mammal collectives. So the theme of this bracket is that it's not like a single animal. It's like the entire pride of lionesses or the entire romp of otters. And so you get the fun things. And so that's what these things are called. You've got a prickle of hedgehogs and a conspiracy of lemurs. I love that. But a herd of reindeer, I thought, well, that's going to be tough to beat. Well, I realized my mistake after I submitted my bracket, and my mistake was this. I was confusing reindeer and caribou. They're common names for the same species. And what I was actually putting all my money on was caribou, not reindeer. And caribou form these large herds in North America. And so you've got the Christmas herd of caribou, and I'm like, that's not the same as reindeer. In Europe, where they call the same species a different name, reindeer, they're more domesticated. Their herds aren't as great. You probably heard of the Laplanders in Finland that herd reindeer. And much of the range of reindeer is in Russia. So what happened, you may have heard this. So there's something going on involving Russia right now that led all of their athletes to be disqualified in international competitions. So my wife just watched the World Championships of Figure Skating, and there were no Russians because they were all basically told you can't compete because of what you're doing in Ukraine. And so the reindeer, well, I'll come back to that in just a bit. I just wanted to give you a little bit more information on the weirdness in how we name things. And so, yeah, my mistake here was confusing caribou and reindeer, but for me, I'm a mammologist, so Rangifer tarandus, it's the same thing, but ecologically, they're a little bit different where they live. Cervus, it used to be everything in Cervus elaphus, it was a single species, but we call them elk in North America. They called them red deer in Europe. Kind of new phylogeny suggests they're two different species. And to make things even more confusing is the genus Alces, which we call moose, they call elk in Europe. It's like, it's very confusing. But back to the reindeer. So basically, the reindeer, as a kind of a Russian international competitor, was disqualified from competing in the tournament. And that kind of totally blew up my bracket. And so no more reindeer. Okay. Bummer. So anyway, one thing that will, if you look at this bracket, something may jump out at you. And the thing that's going to jump out is, well, first of all, you got a walrus versus a lichen. A lichen's not a mammal. And so what happened in 2015, there was a group of ornithologists that basically sued Arizona State University and said, you need to allow non-mammals to participate in March Mammal Madness. They won that suit. It was called the Parker decision. And if you've heard of Ted Parker was an ornithologist, considered one of the greatest field biologists of the 20th century. Ted Parker could identify more than 4,000 species of birds by song alone. He, along with people like Peter Raven, would fly into places like the Amazon of Ecuador and do what's called a rapid assessment. So they would go in and assess the biodiversity of a region, and they could do this quickly because they had so much information in their brains. And Ted tragically died in a plane crash I think it was on one of these rapid assessment things. He was only 40 years old, but it was a huge loss to the ornithology community, to the field biology community. Anyway, so the Parker decision is named after Ted. ASU anticipating an uprising by herpetologists and ichthyologists and entomologists and arachnologists, basically just decided to include all sorts of different taxonomic groups as part of the Parker decision. Quickly on the heels of the Parker decision was Shubin versus Hind. This opened up the tournament to extinct species. And so here we have a thrapsid. So a thrapsid is a mammal-like reptile. Sometimes they're called mammal-like reptiles. And this was a pretty heated debate. So Neil Shubin is a paleontologist, and Hind is one of the founders of the March Mammal Madness. So Shubin and Hind's lawyer, Jessica Light, came up with like a compromise. They said, well, we'll allow extinct species to compete, but not extinct fishes. And Shubin kind of thought, well, you kind of need extinct fishes. They're precursors to the mammals, so you can't really have mammals without these fossil fishes. But Jessica Light kind of argued, but they can't fight. They're just not good competitors. These fossil sarcopterygians just punted along in the mud, gulping air. So they didn't really have much of an arsenal. So anyway, so that was the compromise for Schumann v. Hind in 2016. That said, I just kind of want to try something here. First of all, what do all of these past winners, so these are all the winners of March Mammal Madness since 2020, since the first one. So what do these all have in common? Let's see, just kind of open up the chat here. I'm going to do something called a chat drop. So now, if you look at all the winners, so all the winners get a cover on the box of Wheaties. And so I don't know, you can keep an eye out for this when you go to Walmart next time and see if you can find the Wheaties boxes that have the winners on them. But I'll just kind of tell you on this one, they're all mammals. So even though these two lawsuits allowed other competitors, no non-mammal has ever won March Mammal Madness. So I'm just going to put that out there, but they just could be playing a little bit of catch up. But I'm going to do something called a chat drop. So a chat drop is where I ask a question and you type it in the chat, but do not hit enter until I tell you to. And then when you hit enter, all the answers will kind of like fly in the chat. Okay. So this doesn't let someone pollute other people's opinion with their first answer. So okay, so get ready. So this is the Wheaties box placeholder for this year. And I was looking at it and I'm like, I think there's a hint in here. And so does the 2022 Wheaties box hint at a winner? And I'll kind of like blow it up a little bit here so you can see it a little bit better. And so what do you think the winner might be based on the box of Wheaties here? So type that in if you know what that is, and otherwise just so I don't know. So type that in. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to type in something in the chat, and then I'll tell you to enter. So you should be typing 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, enter. Brilliant. That's exactly right. So it looks like a lemur. Now, Joe kind of like said something here. So remember, I'm looking at this before the tournament began, and I'm like, hey, I wonder if they're subliminally suggesting that lemurs are going to are going to win this. But anyway, I do think they got knocked out. Oh, all right. So I'm going to go to this video. So part of the March Mammal Madness is going to, if you followed along, I don't know if anyone's been following it along, Tim sent out a link, but you can go and they have these video updates. And so what I want you to do is pay attention to how the winners are decided, okay? So this will just go through one of the rounds. You can go to ASU's website. You can follow it in a number of ways. If you type in March Mammal Madness 2022, it'll take you right there. So we're going to watch this video and just pay attention of how critters are winning.
across the state parks of North America. These 16 contenders have trained for, prepared for, or possibly just ignored the first round of battles in the Wild North America division. To the recaps. Not all who wander are lost, but the badger has no idea where he is right now. As he follows a beaver path, the gray wolf attacks, but the badger fights back, snarling and biting. The wolf drops the badger, and the badger runs off to fight another day. The gray wolf is left hungry, but victorious.
MC, the southern bog lemming, appears in the Badlands next to the bison, and they're both foraging peacefully. Isn't this nice? Maybe, oh no! A hawk is on the scene, and the harrier has grabbed the lemming and is flying away, while the bison does nothing, just stands around being the winner.
The marsh rabbit finds itself deep in the Yucatan. It's dark and quiet. Too quiet. Pow! The jaguar ambushes the rabbit. The rabbit leaps into the water and starts swimming. But jaguars can swim too. A killing blow gives the jaguar the victory. Spring is coming to Banff National Park, and the grizzly emerges from hibernation in search of food. But it is still cold here in Canada, and the Mexican free-tailed bat arriving from Florida is shocked by the quick temperature change.
It's cold.
The bat crashes to earth near the bear. He doesn't even notice. The bat makes its way toward the relative warmth of a nearby cave, and off the field of battle, the oblivious grizzly wins.
MC, here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, the black bear is also coming out of hibernation. The 13-lined ground squirrel shows up, sees the bear, and is not taking any chances. The squirrel sounds an alert and runs for cover, leaving the black bear victorious.
The bighorn sheep is foraging in Bighorn Canyon. The coyote contemplates the sheep from afar. Is it worth the chance? The bighorn sheep snorts in disgust, as if to say, bring it on. The coyote reconsiders and retreats. The bighorn sheep, without lifting a hoof, is the victor. The yellow-bellied marmot weighs in at a healthy 23.5 stoats. Meanwhile, the elk weighs 2,259 stoats. This seems unfair. I mean, with the... Our heroic marmot arrives in the Great Smoky Mountains and sits on a rock to get his bearings. He notices the elk grazing nearby. Folks, what would you do if you were suddenly in a strange place near a gigantic creature? Wouldn't you look for cover? That is the smart thing to do, and it is what our brave marmot does, opting for safety over potential squishing. The elk advances.
So as you kind of watched that, and I had a chance to go back and look at some of the chat as well, and I totally agree with Joe. With the Wolverine hasn't won yet, and I'm going to come back to the Wolverine because yeah, I think there's like a the first animal that you saw there that was defeated was the badger, and that was my pick to win it all, and I'm like, come on. But we're going to come back to that. But I wanted to just talk in general about the different strategies here that March Mammal Madness uses for deciding winners. And so you saw a lot of TKO type of strategies. And so, for example, I think the bat was one of those, and the marsh rabbit, they were directly taken out. When I think of who's going to win a battle, it's going to be, something eating something else, or something like that. But that's just one strategy. The other strategy that you saw a lot of was withdraw. So it's just like, well, the marmot won by just hiding. Okay, so just kind of withdrew. That was its strategy. We're going to see the badger also had kind of lost with this strategy, but I have issues with that. It's like, why? Anyway, we're going to come back to that one. This one here is another intervention. And so the do a machina is a third-party intervention, like the eagle taking the lemming was like an example of that third-party intervention. And then I'm not sure. I don't think we saw it here, or did we? No, I think it was later on in the tournament where the jaguar gets basically run over by a train. Now, I've seen some of those hit by car types of strategies before. Yeah, I kind of lost on the jaguar too in the past. But what tends to be true is it's based on good data. So they're not like necessarily just making it up. They're looking at the literature, and there's a lot of good references in here with some good science. So if you actually look at the text, which again, a lot of the classrooms are doing, is they're reading through the text and going through some of the cool fun facts on badgers and wolves as they do this. My issue with the badger losing is, and I'll come back to it a number of times, is that the badger, in my opinion, survived and frustrated the wolf, and it should have been the winner. I'm just gonna say that. I know when in real basketball games, there's the whole, it's like, why couldn't Marquette play better? Now, Marquette did lose to North Carolina, who plays today. And so even though that was like, on the paper, it looked like a closer game, Marquette got their butts handed to them. And but North Carolina's been playing really good this whole time. So yeah, basketball is frustrating, but I will say for me, March Mammal Madness is equally frustrating because mustelids just are not getting their due. Mustelids are the best competitors, and they just cannot seem to win. Okay. The Kansas Jayhawks, I think, are in the Final Four, right, Karen? Pretty sure they're playing Villanova in the Final Four. So you got a bird in there. That's a good point. What do we have here? We've got, I don't know what. I think North Carolina, the mascot is an actual ram. So you've got rams in there too. Anyway, so we have a wolf being deemed the winner, even though the badger frustrated the wolf. I'm just going to kind of take a little segue here and do another chat drop. Because we are the badger state. It's one of the reasons that I chose the badger. It's a good mascot. We have badgers in the state, unlike wolverines in Michigan, a great mascot, but there are no wolverines in Michigan. It's a stupid mascot. Even sillier are the Minnesota's mascot, which is the Golden Gophers, which is basically badger food. I mean, badgers are gopher specialists, so why would you have a mascot that's food for a badger? I don't know. But anyway, so why are badgers, why is the Wisconsin called the badger state? So here's just like a quick chat drop. I'll give you like 10 seconds to jot something down and we'll see what people think. Okay, go. Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Enter. I see a couple mining in northern Wisconsin, miners in early Wisconsin. A weird thing because he's from Colorado. I get that. Or lives in Colorado. I think I don't know where Joe's from. Not Wisconsin. We'll go with not Wisconsin. I've heard the mining thing. I've heard a couple other things. One thing I heard was because our first governor, Nelson Dewey, looked like a badger. And so I thought, is it because he didn't shave his ears, or is it did he never wash his face? And so I got some pictures of Nelson Dewey, and I'm like, he doesn't really look so much like a badger, until I realized that, you know, we're a country of immigrants. And so, you know, in the 1800s, when Nelson Dewey was the governor, what might people have been thinking about? And so he resembles pretty closely the back of a honey badger. So that beard is a dead ringer for a honey badger. But I heard something else. If you look at the stripe on a badger, it looks a little bit like the Wisconsin River coming through the state. And I'd heard a story of Louis Joliet and Jacques Marquette are the early explorers of Wisconsin, and so they kind of were the first to call name the territory after the badger. And so there's this quote, and I'm so ils ont pagaillé jusqu'au milieu de la tronche les blaireaux, which means they paddled the canoe down the middle of the badger's face. And so here's the Wisconsin. They didn't really come down the Wisconsin, though. They came down the Fox, which just is kind of weird. But again, in 1673, Wisconsin wasn't a state, and they kind of went down the Mississippi. So maybe the badger's face was the Mississippi, and then you've got the Fox River here. It's kind of weird that there is no Badger River in Wisconsin. There is Badger Mill Creek near Madison, but that's we get a creek. Badgers get a creek. Again, more evidence of just mustelid blindness. Okay. Joe kind of pointed out that the Wolverine, of all the mustelids, if any mustelid is going to win March Mammal Madness, it's going to be the Wolverine. Wolverines, pound for pound, are going to be like the most ferocious thing. So if we're looking kind of the cats and dogs, in this case, the Wolverine actually did win over the lynx, which was pretty cool. And then I think gorillas can beat a nematode. So just based on what you know, now we've got a battle between a gorilla and a Wolverine. I'm only going to give you 5 seconds for this chat drop. Who wins between gorilla and Wolverine? Go. Write down gorilla or Wolverine. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. I've got 50-50. Gorilla. If a Wolverine can't get past the second round, no mustelid can win. So what I've learned from March Mammal Madness is never bet on a mustelid. We've got a couple things here. I'm just going to point this out. Just I'll I'll eventually move on from this anger I have about mustelids never winning. But this is almost the identical scenario between like the wolf and the badger. We had the tortoise and the panther. But in this scenario, the panther gives up on the tortoise and the tortoise is called the winner. That's just, whatever. I'll get over it. If we look at, so here we're talking a little bit about cats v dogs. Okay, so cats versus dogs. And the best way to do this is find things where a cat is directly up against a dog. And this will give us an idea of if the organizers and the people in the tournament are cat people or they're dog people. And so this first one, we've got a red fox against a bay cat. And so you've got a cat winning. So that's just an N of 1. So we don't really have a lot of data here, but you've got a cat. Now I need to give you a little bit of a primer on cats and dogs. Because within the carnivorans, within the order Carnivora, you actually have a cat-dog split. So we've got the Feliformia, I'm pointing at the screen like you can see it. The Feliformia are cat shapes or cat-like animals, and they include the things that we recognize as cats. Our domestic cats, bobcats and lynx, tigers and lions and stuff like that are all in the family Felidae. But we also have some really cool things like civets and genets. Hyenas are cat-like. Okay, so they're more related to cats than dogs, as are meerkats and mongooses. So those are all cat shapes. And then we have our dog shapes. So the Caeniformia include the bears, as well as the dogs, okay, like the wolves and the foxes. All of our marine carnivorans, which would include earless seals, sea lions, and walruses are dog-like. And then we have some really cool things like red pandas, also giant pandas, which are bears, raccoons, coatis, skunks, and badgers, and then all the mustelids are dog-like. Okay, I bring that up because who do you think is going to win between a badger and a civet? Any thoughts between a European badger and a civet? I won't even do a chat drop. You can just type it in. Badger v civet, who would you pick? You know, I'd pick badger too, but badgers, I've learned, they never win. Mustelids don't win. The organizers just have something against them. So here we have a cat-like versus a solongoi. A solongoi is, first of all, what is a solongoi? This is a challenge for y'all. To the first person to get this in the chat wins a thumbs up from me. Yeah, so I like civets too, but I could have told you that the badger wasn't going to win just because it's a badger. Okay, so what's a solongoi? Anybody? That's right. I got weasel. It's the pica of weasels. That's adorable. All right, a weasel is a mustelid. And so now if you've got a cat-like hyena against a mustelid, any mustelid, you now know mustelids can't win. It's going to be hyena. In fact, hyena won this bracket. And the hyena winning this bracket says something to me about whether the organizers are cat-loving or dog-loving people in general. So I will just go with they are cat people. All right, something else, just briefly, this is from a paper by Hind on just if we look at the proportion of all the mammalian class, all of the class Mammalia, and this is just like, so mammals are mostly rodents, right? Like 40, I think 42% rodents, and bats. Okay, so those are the two big groups. like 22% bats. And so, but when we look at the proportion of participants, rodents are underrepresented. Bats are very underrepresented relative to their how many there are, right, in the class. What are overrepresented are actually artiodactyls. Are overrepresented. You've got this really cool thing here. These are hedgehogs, moles, and shrews. And so you don't see a lot of hedgehogs, moles, and shrews in March Mammal Madness. So they're more common than they are represented in the tournament. More primates, but then these are carnivores. So there's very heavy bias toward carnivores just because they're going to be good competitors, and the educational value of carnivores is pretty high. People like carnivores, primates, and artiodactyls more than shrews and moles anyway. Okay. Now, I guess just a pause here, and this might be an opportunity to unmute if you want to unmute. Did anyone find anything weird so far about my talk?
That it is April 1st.
It is April 1st. So what does that have to do with the talk? You're right. You're absolutely right. So it's April Fool's Day. Okay. So there's a lot in here that I made up, and there's a lot in here that's actually true. Okay. And so does anyone know what information I gave in here that's a little bit not entirely accurate or correct?
I was interested in the story of the Badger State.
So the story of the Badger State was, and I'll get back to the Wheaties box too. Actually, yes, the Wheaties box, you cannot find a Wheaties box on the shelves. That graphic was real, but yeah, you can't buy a Wheaties box with the winner on it. The Badger State, the people that put mining were actually right. Now the mining is in the southwest part of the state. If you know the mascot for UW-Platteville, it's the Pioneers. And so our early miners were in that southwestern part of the state. And that's where, because of the digging, that fossorial behavior, that's where they were like badgers. So they were called badgers. It's got nothing to do with Nelson Dewey, and certainly not, there is no French saying that they paddled down the badger's face, but I don't know, I liked it. Also, obviously there's no, there weren't any lawsuits. There were no lawsuits against Arizona State on allowing non-mammals to play, or paleontology lawsuits or anything like that. So no biases or anything like that. What is true though is March Mammal Madness is a real thing. And we've got a lot of very talented people working on March Mammal Madness. There's a lot of good science in March Mammal Madness. The science comes primarily from these sources. Journal of Mammalogy is a big one. I won't get into all of this, but if you read the narrative, you're going to learn about a lot about these animals just by following the battles. Arizona State actually tracks the traffic on their site, and in the pre-tournament, so as soon as the bracket drops, everyone's kind of researching the animals to figure out which animals would win in these mock battles. And so you get a lot of page hits, you get a lot of people looking for educational resources to incorporate this into their classrooms. And so that's This is something that is used in classrooms. And what I like about this graphic is it's used pretty much in proportion. So if you look at the geographic range, this is the school population, and this is how many are engaged in March Mammal Madness. That lines up pretty closely. But this is interesting, I think, for this population in particular. This is the student makeup based on rural, urban, and suburban. And you get a higher proportion of rural and suburban schools using March Mammal Madness, and a lower proportion of urban schools doing activities with March Mammal Madness. So I really wanted to bring the this tool, I guess, to urban teachers and an urban audience. So please I'll put the word out on this as an educational tool in your area. As I mentioned, it's a lot of very talented biologists, but a tattoo artist named Sharon Henning a number of years ago kind of got hooked on March Mammal Madness and asked if she could do some illustrations of the competitors. And so she would draw these. If you saw even in the video, there were some beautiful illustrations of the competitors. I think it was the elk and the marmot. Can't remember which one. But these are just some of her drawings, some of her illustrations, and I love that they including art into this. And then just some of the outreach. So this is a real thing. So I'm beyond I'm beyond the April Fool's part of the event here. There is something called No One Eats Alone Day. You know, if you knew kids in the cafeteria that, you know, that kind of ate by themselves, and so this is a kind of an inclusivity event. And again, they couldn't help themselves. They had to put some biology in here that coyotes and badgers sometimes hunt together. And so this idea, and again, these are Price Sharon's illustrations, and I love this poster. I kind of want to get one. But just the outreach and the education, and something that we do as a mammal society to educate people about mammals, basically. So that concludes the lecture. Thank you for your attention. I'm just going to stop sharing.